At 1:19 in the morning on March 8, 2014, a calm voice spoke 6 words to air traffic control. "Good night, Malaysian 370. 2 minutes later, the plane disappeared from civilian radar screens. No mayday, no distress call, nothing. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was a Boeing 777 carrying 239 people, and in an age when a lost phone can be located in seconds, it became the only modern airliner to vanish almost without a trace. How does that even happen? Start with the basics. MH370 departed Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m., bound for Beijing, a routine overnight run scheduled to land just after 6:30. On board were 227 passengers, 153 of them Chinese citizens, along with 12 Malaysian crew. In the cockpit sat Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, with more than 18,000 flight hours, one of the airline's most experienced pilots. Beside him was First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27, flying his first 777 trip without a training captain watching over his shoulder. The aircraft, registration 9M, Embro, was 12 years old and well-maintained. The weather was clear. The tanks held enough fuel for about 7.5 hours of flight. Everything about this trip was ordinary, right up until the moment it wasn't. At 1:07 a.m., the plane's automatic reporting system sent a routine data transmission. It would be the last. At 1:19, as the flight approached the boundary between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, Kuala Lumpur Control issued the standard instruction to contact Ho Chi Minh City. The captain's sign-off was calm and unremarkable. Then, at 1:21 a.m., directly over a waypoint called Igari in the South China Sea, the transponder, the device that broadcasts a plane's identity and altitude to controllers, went silent. Vietnamese controllers waited for a radio call that never came. The blip simply faded from their screens. But the aircraft had not crashed. It had turned. Malaysian military radar, which can track objects without a transponder, recorded what happened next, though nobody was watching it live. The contact that had been MH370 made a hard turn to the southwest, almost a U-turn, and flew back across the Malay Peninsula. It passed near the island of Penang, where, investigators later reported, the first officer's mobile phone briefly registered with a cell tower. No call was ever connected. The plane then tracked northwest up the Strait of Malacca, following established air corridors, flying like an aircraft under control, not an aircraft in distress. At 2:22 a.m., military radar logged its final contact, roughly 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang, out over the Andaman Sea. After that, every radar on Earth lost it. The radar data was not made public for days, and Malaysia was slow to admit what its own military had recorded. By sunrise, families were gathering at the arrivals hall in Beijing, staring at a board that said the flight was delayed. It was not delayed, and for days, every search plane was looking in exactly the wrong place. Ships and aircraft combed the South China Sea, near the point where the transponder went dark. They found nothing, because MH370 had kept flying for nearly 7 more hours. Here is how we know. High above the Indian Ocean, a communications satellite operated by the British company Inmarsat had been doing something quiet and automatic. Once an hour, its ground station sent the aircraft an electronic status check, a handshake, simply confirming the plane's terminal was still powered. The plane answered 7 times. These pings carried no location, no altitude, no words. But they proved something staggering. The jet remained airborne until 8:19 a.m., more than 7 hours after takeoff, almost exactly when its fuel would have been exhausted. That final transmission was different. It was a log-on request, the kind the system sends after a power interruption, consistent with the engines flaming out and a backup unit briefly restoring the electronics. The plane was still flying at 8:19. The question was where. Inmarsat's engineers attacked the problem using 2 measurements never designed for tracking. The first was the burst timing offset, how long each ping took to travel between aircraft and satellite, which revealed distance and drew enormous arcs across the globe where the plane must have been at each handshake. The second was the burst frequency offset, a tiny Doppler shift in the signal, the same effect that bends the pitch of a passing siren. That Doppler data broke the tie between a northern route over Asia and a southern route over open water. The map pointed south. On March 24, 2014, Malaysia's Prime Minister announced that Flight 370's path had ended in the southern Indian Ocean, west of Australia, one of the most remote stretches of water on the planet, far from any possible landing site. 239 people, traced not by radar or wreckage, but by an hourly electronic heartbeat nobody had ever used this way before. Searchers finally had a haystack. It was the size of a country. The seventh arc, the line where that final ping placed the aircraft, ran for thousands of kilometers through water up to 6,000 meters deep. The priority zone lay roughly 2,000 kilometers off the coast of Western Australia, days of sailing from the nearest port. Australia led the hunt. Ships and planes from multiple nations scanned the surface for floating debris and recovered nothing but fishing junk. Then came the underwater phase, towed sonar arrays and autonomous submarines mapping a seabed of ridges, trenches, and underwater volcanoes that had never been charted in detail. Over nearly 3 years, crews scanned 120,000 square kilometers of ocean floor, an effort costing around $160 million, the most expensive search in aviation history. They discovered 2 ships that sank in the 1800s. They did not find the plane. Then, 16 months after the disappearance, the ocean itself delivered the first hard evidence, 4,000 kilometers from the search zone. On July 29, 2015, a beach-cleaning crew on Reunion Island, east of Madagascar, found a barnacle-crusted slab of metal and composite washed up on the sand. It was a flaperon, a moving panel from the trailing edge of a wing. Investigators matched it to MH370. Here was the first physical proof that the aircraft had gone down somewhere in the Indian Ocean. More followed. An American lawyer named Blaine Gibson began walking beaches in Mozambique, Madagascar, and Tanzania, and found fragment after fragment, including a panel stenciled with the words "no step." In total, more than 30 suspected pieces have been recovered along the western rim of the Indian Ocean, a handful confirmed as definitely from the missing jet. Drift modeling of the debris matched the satellite arcs. Everything pointed to the same lonely patch of sea. But the recovered wreckage raised a darker question, because the flight path itself forced investigators to ask who, or what, was in control during those final 7 hours. Consider the 2 leading explanations. One is catastrophe, a fire or sudden decompression that incapacitated everyone on board, leaving a ghost plane cruising on autopilot until the fuel ran dry. But that theory struggles to explain the precise turn at Igari, executed in the radar gap between 2 countries, and the deliberate-looking route along airspace boundaries. The other explanation is human. In 2016, investigators confirmed that a home flight simulator belonging to Captain Zahari contained a deleted route, created weeks before the disappearance, that tracked deep into the southern Indian Ocean. Malaysian police found no motive, no note, and no warning signs in his finances or behavior, and his family has always rejected any accusation. The official Malaysian report, 495 pages released in July 2018, concluded the Tunback was likely flown under manual control rather than autopilot, yet stated plainly that the team was unable to determine the real cause. No theory has ever been proven. No one has ever been blamed. The search has never truly ended. In 2018, the American firm Ocean Infinity scanned another 112,000 square kilometers on a no-find, no-fee basis and came up empty. In 2025, the company returned under a new agreement with Malaysia worth $70 million, payable only if the wreckage is found, hunting a refined target zone built from years of drift studies and signal reanalysis. Somewhere beneath those waves sit 2 flight recorders, and inside them, perhaps, the answer. Until a sonar scan finally paints the outline of a Boeing 777 on the seabed, MH370 stands as the sharpest lesson of the modern age. We build a world that watches everything, and a plane carrying 239 people slipped through it anyway. 7 silent pings, 30 pieces of wreckage, and one question that refuses to die: who turned that plane, and why? If stories like this stay with you, there are more true mysteries waiting on this channel.